I live in a small town. If you blink, you'll miss it. Best we can boast about is a single stop sign and a gas station, which we only have because of the nearby highway. Any actual semblance of a town is 25 minutes away. So when things get scary out here, it's definitely amplified. The occasional homeless person is not a big deal. They're often just drifting through. Drug addicts run rampant and will steal everything they can from your house, but it's normal out here. However, what happened a few years ago certainly wasn't normal. Originally, I was in a dead sleep in my bed. I only woke up because it was burning hot in my room. But it was summertime and not much I could do about it. I just remember tossing and turning until I got a creepy feeling that fell into the pit in my stomach. I glanced over to the bathroom door that was open with the light on. Everything seemed normal. I left the light on so I wouldn't trip and die if I had to pee in the middle of the night. Next, I glanced at the windows directly across from my bed. I had no curtains, but I did have a shitty set of blinds. Part of the blinds are broken from wear and tear, and the crappy AC output beneath it would make them move back and forth every so often. The yard light was still on, but what made me stop was the outline at my window. Figure of someone was directly at my window, almost like it was waiting for the blinds to move and watch me. I didn't have an imagination as a child, and that had been trained right out of me. But the sight was enough to pour every horror film into my head in that moment. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled my blankets over my head and slept in a cloth oven that night. By morning time, the figure was gone. I remember running to my mom's room on the verge of tears in the morning, telling her about what had happened. She laughed at me like I was an idiot and told me it was probably just a stray cat that had climbed up there for one odd reason or the other. I almost believed her since my window was pretty high off the ground. But something just did not sit right. Later, when we were doing yard work, I glanced over at my window and saw one of our metal patio chairs had been pushed up to it. I pointed it out to my mom, who proceeded to chew me out. "That's how the cat probably got up there, moron. Stop leaving furniture everywhere." But I hadn't moved it. It was heavy enough that I struggled with it, so we moved it back, and so began a pattern. At night, I'd see a figure, complain to my mom, and we'd find the chair move back every single morning. This went on for weeks and weeks. My mother stopped caring about my concerns until one morning we saw where the outside screen of my window had been sliced open. I still remember her shaking her head and complaining about those damn stray cats that we had still yet to see. I could tell she was unnerved by that development. I couldn't handle it anymore. I opted to sleep in our living room that night. The only problem was, our kitchen and living room are connected, which meant there were always several windows. The first night of my move went well despite my back hurting from the couch. I avoided my room like the plague. It wasn't until about 4 days later we ran into an issue. I woke up and glanced at the clock above the fireplace, and it read a little past 3 a.m. Couldn't realize why I'd woken up until it happened again. There was a beam of light shining in from the kitchen window, almost like someone was shining a flashlight in. I saw it trace along the walls and land on the love seat across from the couch I was on. I was mortified. I told my mom. She continued to laugh at me. I gave in and decided I would sleep in my dad's room, even though it had a gigantic window. He slept in the recliner with a huge TV, so I felt safe having someone around. The yard light was directly outside the window, so it seemed foolproof. That was until I woke up out of habitual fear and watched through the window across from the bed. Everything seemed normal for just a moment. As time drug on, I felt more and more like a moron. Maybe my mom was right. That was until I saw a lone figure come out of the woods by the backyard shed, walk directly under the light, and head to the patio furniture like he'd been here plenty of times before. I still remembered that large build the man had, and the confidence was like he was the one who lived here and wasn't creeping around my yard in the dead of night. I just remember listening to the TV until I fell asleep again, hoping to get another glimpse. My dad would have been pissed if I had woken him up. He was grumpy on a good day and terrifying on a bad day. I didn't feel like risking it unless I had solid proof because I was scared. The next morning, my mom chewed me out again for the same patio furniture. It was now a routine almost a month later, but this time something new had happened. She demanded I stop playing in the toolboxes of the garage. A bunch of tools had been taken out and left on our doorstep. Screwdrivers, a large hammer, flashlights, etc. It wasn't me. I begged my mom and pleaded with her, just stay up with me one night. We couldn't close our garage because it was an open carport. and I wasn't going to get my ass beaten for touching tools because of someone else. It was driving me mad. Finally, she agreed, and that night we would stay awake in the living room. I finally fell asleep before my mom did, but I remember her waking me up in a panic. She pointed to the window that overlooked into our garage. We could see the top of someone's head as they walked back and forth. There was a sound of someone placing metal tools down on the brick steps, as if they were trying to be quiet but couldn't fully muffle it. She whispered for me to go wake my dad. My dad was angry, having been woken up in the middle of the night by his frantic daughter. He grabbed his pistol and headed out from the back door, towards the front of the house where the garage was located. We heard my dad screaming and someone dropping tools, then the shot of a gun twice. The frantic footsteps pounded out of the garage felt like they were coming from my chest. My mom peeked out the window and then opened the door. My dad stumbled in. He had missed both shots because of his unstable aim, but told us that there was a man crouching at our front door, looking at our door handle. None of us slept that night, and in the morning the law from the closest town arrived. They didn't do much but ask if anything else had been stolen, for a description of the man, and then told us to install cameras. That was it. They said the guy was probably just looking for something easy to steal for quick money. If that had been the case, why didn't he steal any of the tools, the generator, the welder, or broken into any of the vehicles just sitting in the garage? We finally set up some hunting trail cameras around the house, but nothing has happened since. Coming home from college for the holidays, I still have nightmares about the incident years later, especially when I sleep in my own bed. I don't know what he was looking for or why he did the things he did. Whatever the case may be, man at the window, let's not meet.
Hey everyone, we truly appreciate your support. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel for more upcoming stories and exciting content.
This happened in 2016 when I was a 17-year-old first-year college student in film school. I'm now 22, and my name is Julia. I lived alone in my first ever apartment. It was really small, but I was really proud of my independence. I never felt safe in this apartment for several reasons. There were multiple gates in the residence that needed to be opened through a code. Only the people who lived there knew. My door had 3 different locks, and it was right next to the university, so most people who lived in that neighborhood were college students. Nothing bad had ever happened in the neighborhood before. I've always been really careful when it comes to locking my door when I leave my house. I always check twice. So this one time, I leave to go to class and lock my door, but for some reason, couldn't get the key out of the lock. I was completely stuck, so I went to get the caretaker of the building to help me, but he wasn't there. It was starting to get really late for class, so I went to class with the key still in the lock. I took off the keychain first, so it's not too noticeable. When I got home, the caretaker was back, so he came to help me, and we couldn't get it out for at least 15 minutes. Until finally he somehow managed to. He told me that the lock was damaged, but that I didn't necessarily need to change it. If only I lock it once instead of twice. I said okay, and that was the end of it. I really wasn't worried because of how safe I felt in this building. Flash forward to 2 months later. I was taking out the trash one night around 11 p.m. while on the phone with my sister. I remember telling her that I was taking out the trash, and that I would take a shower afterwards before heading to a party. As I previously said, I always lock the door, even just to take out the trash because of my lock being damaged, and I only locked it once. When I got back to my apartment, I found the door unlocked, which immediately alarmed me. So I went into the apartment and locked the door immediately with 3 different types of locks. When you walk into my apartment, you have the main room in front of you and the bathroom door immediately to your left. I had left the bathroom door slightly open, enough so I could see a man in my shower, turning his back to me. Naturally, when I saw this, I tried to open the door and leave as fast as possible, except my main lock was damaged from the 2-month earlier process, and I couldn't open it no matter how hard I tried. In this moment, all I could think about was the fact that I had to leave as fast as possible. I jumped out of the window without really thinking. Figured it was the only solution. except I live on the second floor, so I completely smashed my ankles on the landing. I started running in whichever way I could, and when I got a little further from the building, I looked back and a man was there, at my window, watching me run away. I thought of two possible outcomes. Either the man was going to jump and chase me, except I wouldn't get far with my twisted ankles, or he would get scared of the height and be locked in my apartment. Thankfully, he picked option 2. I went to hide in a bush a little further on, and then called the police, who arrived in just 10 minutes because I lived close to the station. They pushed open my door, and the man was just sitting there on my couch, holding a kitchen knife, waiting for me to come back, like he didn't think I would call the police. They arrested the guy and told me later he had already been arrested for sexual assault, rape, attempted kidnapping, and attempted murder. They also told me how everything had just happened. Like I said, it was a very friendly neighborhood with mostly college students, so he got inside the building by other people holding the door for him. He heard me then telling my sister I was about to take a shower, which is why he was waiting in the bathroom for me. Tampered with my lock while I was taking out the trash. He apparently noticed me on school campus and followed me to my home several times before succeeding to actually get in. He stayed on the inside waiting for me because I had recently changed my phone, and the previous one was still lying on the table, so he thought I didn't have a phone with me to call the police. I don't live there anymore, but after that, to get into the building, we all needed identification proving we lived there. Building IDs were created, and we had to scan them every time. It was the only way to go back inside the building. Nothing bad happened in the neighborhood after that. It's been back to being very peaceful and friendly, fortunately. This happened a long time ago. The time I was living alone in a first floor apartment. My girlfriend had been sick at the time and ended up in the hospital dealing with a rare disease. She recovered fine from it, but during those weeks my life was pretty much go to work, go to the hospital to be with her, come back to the house for dinner, and then bed. It was Friday night and I was alone, so I decided to distract myself by reading and watching some videos on YouTube. Hours passed, and at 3 a.m. I was in bed with my iPad in hand, almost falling asleep. And I heard it. I knew that sound pretty well. You see, outside right in front of my bedroom door, there was a long corridor that leads directly to the kitchen. This apartment was in a building built in the 50s, and the kitchen door was old and had become slightly bent. That meant that whenever you turned the doorknob to open the door, it would snap out of place with a distinct clack sound. And that was the sound I had just heard. A lot of thoughts ran through my mind in that moment. Had I dreamt it in my semi-sleeping state? Or maybe the sound was real, but what had happened was the doorknob internal mechanism broke, and it opened by itself. Or, of course, maybe someone was in my house, and they had just opened the door. At this point, my heart was racing, and I started considering my options. I had a broomstick next to my bed. You may ask why I had it there, and to be honest, I had it exactly there because I lived alone and thought one day I might be in a situation like this, where I would need some kind of weapon. My girlfriend even used to joke about it, but I guess that my paranoia was now paying off in the most unfortunate of situations. So I decided I was going to take that stick on one hand and grab my cell phone in the other. I would open up my bedroom door while calling 911. And if no one else was in the apartment, I would just apologize to the operator on the other end of the line and explain the situation. However, back in those days, my cell phone wasn't yet a smartphone because it had this feature I found interesting, even though I hardly ever used it. If you pressed on a couple of specific keys, it would start ringing like someone was calling you. It was meant to be used when you wanted to simulate you were getting a call to get out of a boring conversation or tough situation. Clumsily, I pressed on those keys and the phone started ringing. I quickly shut it up, but now it had become clear inside the apartment that I was awake. If someone was outside my bedroom, they certainly heard it. What was going to happen? I stopped for a few seconds to hear my surroundings. Nothing. It was dead quiet. I decided to continue with my plan. I dialed 911 with one hand and raised the broomstick with the other and quickly opened the door. As soon as I did that, someone sprinted in front of me in the corridor and quickly got into the kitchen, closing the door behind them. I screamed, "Hey!" and started pursuing, but a split second later I thought, stop. What if there is someone else in the apartment? What if another intruder sneaks up on you from behind? In front of me, there was a corridor in the kitchen, but on my left, there was another corridor that led to the living room and office. The office had the light on, so the intruder had to be in there, but I didn't know if he had company. I took a step back into the entrance of my room so that I wouldn't be caught off guard.
Sir, are you there?
The 911 operator was calling me on the phone. I quickly explained to him what was happening, gave him my address, and he told me the police were on their way. They had a patrol car nearby, so I should just wait, and then he hung up. The apartment was dead silent, and I was terrified. There's only 3 things I had been able to notice on the intruder. He had a light-colored sweatshirt with horizontal black lines, dark hair, and he smelled really bad. In fact, the smell was still in my apartment, and I could still sense it. Police arrived after 7 or 8 minutes, which felt like ages. The apartment door was next to the bedroom, so I managed to quickly approach it and unlock the door to let them in. I explained what had happened to the police, and they had said we should go through the whole apartment and check every single hiding place. They had seen situations like this before where a burglar had hidden himself for a long period of time, even after the homeowners had called the police, just to later attack them. The apartment wasn't that big, so it was easy to conclude that no one else was hiding there. In the kitchen, it was obvious what had happened. It had these large windows that faced the back of the building, where we had a small community garden. I had left one of the windows open next to it, and on the ground there was a large drain pipe along the wall. The intruder had used the pipe to climb inside my window and get in. The police left to go look around the neighborhood for someone matching the description of the sweatshirt I described. While they were gone, it still smelled that horrible odor the intruder had left in the apartment. After around 20 minutes, they came back. They couldn't find anyone. The burglar was long gone. Luckily, he didn't have the chance to steal anything while he was inside. But the audacity, he must have seen the light on in my bedroom through the edges of the door, and he still tried walking past it to steal something from the office. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I went to the garden in the back to try to find further clues about the intruder, but didn't find anything. The neighbor in the building next door was at the window, and I called out to her. I told her what had happened, and she smiled and said, "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. We all have stories like that in this place. You should never leave your windows open. Maybe you should consider getting some bars to protect them." Next day, I bought a motion alarm and installed it inside the kitchen. I never had another experience like that in the apartment, but to be honest, I never slept the same way in that bedroom. I was pretty traumatized after those events. At night, I would fear hearing the sound of the kitchen door snapping out of its place. A few years later, I moved out to a larger apartment in another neighborhood. This time it was on a 7th floor, so much harder for intruders to get in through the windows. So to the intruder that came into my apartment and smelled really bad, let's never meet again.